He invited her to play chess in front of everyone, just to watch her fail. She smiled, picked up the black queen, and made a move that froze the room. He leaned forward, confused. This wasn't part of the joke. Why did she look like she'd been waiting her whole life for this moment? And what happens when the piece they underestimated flips the entire board? Dorian Hayes didn't smile. He just waved toward the chessboard at the center of the executive lounge, his voice casual, eyes ice-cold. "Let's see what the night staff can do." The others laughed, all white, all powerful. Floor-to-ceiling windows glowed with Chicago's skyline behind them, casting reflections off crystal tumblers and expensive cufflinks. At the far end of the room stood Elena Morris, alone, gloved hands resting on her janitor's cart. Her dark skin shimmered faintly under the recessed lighting. She didn't blink, didn't flinch. Her name tag was peeling. Her uniform a size too big, but the stillness in her face, it was the kind that doesn't come from fear, it comes from memory. Dorian gestured again. "Step right up. We've got a seat open for tonight's guest of honor." A few executives scoffed. "She even know the rules?" someone whispered. Another smirked. "It's not checkers, sweetheart." Elena moved forward. The soft squeak of her soles against the marble floor was the only sound that followed. She didn't speak until she reached the table. "I'll take black," she said quietly. Dorian arched an eyebrow. "Bold." She didn't answer, just began resetting the pieces. Her hands didn't hesitate. Her fingers moved with precision, like muscle memory still lived in her fingertips. Not in showmanship, but in silence. The game began. Dorian opened aggressively, slashing with practiced moves, the kind taught at East Coast academies and polished in charity tournaments with wine and donors. But Elena, she answered like water folding over stone, fluid, patient, unmoved. By move 5, someone coughed awkwardly. By move 10, the laughter stopped. By 13, Dorian leaned forward. By 19, he whispered, "Wait." Then silence. Checkmate. Elena stood, smoothing her uniform. "Thank you for the game, Mr. Hayes," she said softly. "I'll get back to cleaning now." She turned, pushed the cart toward the elevator. The polished floors reflected her exit. And the board? Still frozen in checkmate. The room didn't speak. The bourbon didn't pour. The executives, they just sat there. Some looking at Dorian, others at the board, like they couldn't tell if it was a trick or if something irreversible had just happened. When the elevator doors closed behind her, something unspoken lingered. It wasn't just respect, it was disruption. The kind that stings in places privilege doesn't reach. Dorian didn't move. His hand hovered above the king, the one that had fallen. He didn't lift it, didn't speak. He just sat there, staring at the place where she had been sitting. And for the first time in his perfectly mapped-out life, he wasn't sure if he had just played a game, or been played. Dorian Hayes didn't sleep that night. His penthouse was built for control. Clean lines, monochrome walls, curated art that whispered of power. But that night, everything felt tilted. The silence clung to him like a wet coat. He poured himself a drink and stared out the window. But in his mind, he wasn't looking at the skyline. He was staring at her. The woman who said nothing, who didn't flinch, and who dismantled him in 19 moves. Her name tag had read, Elena. That much he remembered. No last name, no resume, no rank. She'd appeared from the periphery, made him look small, and walked away like it hadn't even mattered. He turned to his laptop. At first, he typed her name into the employee directory. Elena Morris. The profile was almost blank. Night shift, no phone number, no address, no emergency contact. He tried LinkedIn, Facebook, even Instagram. Nothing matched. No photos, no college bios, no tournament stats, just noise. How could someone with hands like that, who made the board breathe, be invisible? He dove deeper. U.S. Chess Federation archives, local Southside tournaments, high school leagues from the past 2 decades. Then he found it. A grainy photo from a 2008 neighborhood invitational. A 12-year-old girl kneeling beside a chessboard, braids tucked behind one ear, eyes focused on something beyond the frame. Caption: E. Morris, Rook Whisperer. Dorian exhaled. So it hadn't been luck. It had been legacy. And something about that realization didn't just bruise his ego. It cracked something beneath it. The next morning, he skipped his meetings. Didn't call his assistant. Didn't check the markets. Instead, he took the service elevator down to sub-level 3, where the tile floors smelled like bleach and nobody wore Italian suits. People stared as he walked by. Maintenance crews paused. Janitors exchanged glances. But Elena wasn't there. A clipboard near the door said she was off shift. 2 days. No reason. No forwarding info. Back upstairs, Dorian paced. She had humiliated him. Quietly. Elegantly. Without lifting her voice or raising her chin. And he couldn't stop thinking about it. So on the third night, he stayed late. He waited in the same lounge. Alone. The lights dimmed. The chessboard reset. The black pieces faced her direction this time. His own king stared back at him like it knew better. At exactly 11:42 p.m., the door hissed open. Elena entered, pushing her cart. Her eyes found him instantly. No surprise, no fear. Just that same calm, bottomless stillness, like a lake that refused to ripple, no matter how hard you tried to skip stones. He stood slowly. "I didn't mean to make a joke of you," he said. "That night." "You didn't," she replied, slipping on gloves. "You asked for a game. I gave you one." He watched her start cleaning the table. "You're good," he said. "Used to be." Dorian moved toward the board. "Where'd you learn?" She didn't answer right away. Then, "My father. Steelworker. Played in the park with other men who came off shift." He nodded. "Tournaments?" She hesitated. "I stopped before high school." "Why?" She looked up, and for the first time, he saw it. Not pride, but exhaustion. Because hospitals don't run on dreams, and little sisters don't feed themselves. She wasn't expecting him to ask again, but he did, quietly, without performance. "Play another game. No audience, no jokes, just us." Elena didn't answer. She finished wiping the edge of a conference table and turned toward the cart. Then, without looking at him, she said, "If you open with the King's Gambit again, I'm flipping the board." Dorian blinked, then smiled. They sat. This time she didn't come to destroy him. She came to challenge. And he, for once, came not to prove, but to learn. Move by move, silence settled around them like snowfall. The kind of silence that wasn't empty, but charged. She played with patience. He played with caution. The match ended in a draw. She stood, tugging off her gloves. "I should mop before the wax sets." He stared at the board. "You're the most disciplined player I've ever faced." She shrugged. "Discipline's easy, when everything else in your life is chaos." She turned to go, but he called after her. "Elena." She paused. "I'd like to play again." She nodded once, no words, and disappeared through the doorway. But something had shifted. This time he didn't feel humiliated. He felt humbled and hooked. Every night after that, Dorian stayed behind. Sometimes she'd arrive and they'd play. Other times she'd clean in silence while he stared at architectural drafts he didn't care about. There were nights when no words passed between them. And still, the room felt full. When they played, it wasn't flirtation. It was something more precise. Like two minds mapping each other, discovering hidden strategies behind emotional armor. She was brutal when necessary, graceful when mercy served the win. One night, as the scent of floor polish still hung in the air, he asked the question that had been coiling inside him for days. "Why are you still here?" She didn't look up. She was holding a knight between her fingers. "You mean this job?" "Yeah." She placed the piece gently. "Because it pays the bills. Because stability is safer than starting over." But you could be somewhere else. Teaching. Competing. Coaching. Now she looked at him. Dead on. Not everyone gets second chances handed to them in crystal tumblers and mahogany boardrooms, Mr. Hayes. He didn't respond. Later that night, after she left, he stared at the seat she had just vacated. Something in him wanted to offer her something. A recommendation, a check, a title. Not out of pity, out of admiration, out of debt. But he didn't. He knew she wouldn't take it, not unless she earned it. 3 days later, he left the office early. No driver, no calls. Just Dorian, in his own car, driving to a part of the city he had only ever seen in foundation reports and campaign donations. The rec center near 53rd looked abandoned from the outside. But inside, he heard it. Plastic chess pieces sliding across beat-up boards. In the corner, Elena knelt beside a group of kids no older than 8, guiding them through a defensive tactic. Her face lit up in a way he'd never seen. He stood in the doorway. And for once, he didn't speak. He just watched her. Not survive, not clean, not fight, but teach. The hallway fell quiet whenever she entered now. First it was subtle, a pause in conversation, a glance too long. Then came the silence in the elevators, the way voices dropped when she stepped into a room with a mop. By the end of the second week, Elena felt it in her bones, not fear, recognition, the kind that doesn't come with applause, but with suspicion. She finished another quiet match with Dorian, their 4th draw in 6 days, and packed her things quickly. "You're in a rush," he said, sliding his king back into its velvet case. "I've got other floors to mop," she replied without looking up. He leaned back. "You're upset." "No." "Elena," she snapped. "I don't need a babysitter, Mr. Hayes." He blinked. She met his eyes, voice steady but sharp. "Whatever this is between us, it's turning into ammunition for people who already think I don't belong here." Dorian sat in silence. "You might be used to being misunderstood and still winning," she continued. "But I don't get that luxury. One wrong game outside the rules and suddenly I'm getting favors or working an angle." He nodded slowly. "Understood." The next night, she entered the lounge to find no Dorian, just the chessboard. One move made. A post-it beneath it read, "Your turn." "I'm still playing, just staying out of sight." She stared at it for a long time, then made her move. No notes, no messages, just chess. For the next 4 nights, that's how it went. He'd leave a move. She'd answer. A queen, a bishop, a gambit, a sacrifice. Their conversation had lost words, and somehow gained meaning. But outside that room, the walls kept closing in. On the 5th day, she was called into HR. The room was pale, padded chairs, a framed poster about workplace harmony. The woman in the beige blazer smiled tight. "We just want to ensure everything remains professional." "There have been questions." Elena sat still. "I mop floors, and sometimes I play chess. With the CEO. After hours. No money, no contracts, just games." The HR woman's voice softened artificially. "You must understand how this appears." "I understand that appearances are a luxury," Elena replied, "and usually reserved for those with titles." The smile dropped. "Am I being disciplined?" "No, not at all. Then I have work to do." She stood, didn't look back. That night she debated skipping the executive floor entirely. Let someone else clean up their leftover scotch and strategy memos. But something pulled her back. When she entered, the board was set mid-game. His latest move bold, a queen sacrifice. She blinked, then smiled. He'd learned something. She played her counter. This time she didn't leave in silence. She left a note. "Nice try, but your diagonal was exposed 3 moves ago. E." The next morning, the Veracitron boardroom buzzed with graphs and growth models. Dorian Hayes entered, not with projections, but with a single-page memo. Title: Southside STEM and Chess Initiative, Pilot Proposal. A senior VP scoffed. "You want to allocate funds for inner-city chess? Dorian's voice was flat. "We've failed this part of the city before. It's time we did something real." "And the optics?" another asked, clearly thinking of the rumors. He looked up. "The optics are that we finally saw brilliance in a janitor and had the courage not to look away. The tournament hall didn't feel grand. It felt surgical. Fluorescent lighting buzzed above long rows of plastic tables, each one lined with chessboards, clocks, and open scorebooks. The air smelled like carpet glue, old trophies, and coffee someone had forgotten on a radiator. Elena stood by the entrance, her badge clipped crooked on her collar. E. Morris, independent. She wore a simple navy blouse and sneakers scrubbed so clean they looked out of place. Around her, competitors buzzed. Teenage prodigies glued to tablets, grandmasters in tailored blazers, middle-aged hobbyists adjusting their glasses with nervous fingers. She didn't fit in, and yet she stood like the board had been waiting for her. Across the room, Dorian entered, not in a suit, but in jeans and a hoodie. He didn't approach. He nodded. She nodded back. It was enough. Her first match was against a smug club player who offered small talk about how brave she was to enter. She didn't speak. She dismantled him in 27 moves. The second opponent was younger, faster, reckless. Elena slowed the game down like syrup on a cold plate. By the time the girl realized what was happening, her clock had bled out. By sunset, Elena was undefeated. But the whispers started early. Near the refreshment table, she passed a group of spectators. "Isn't she that janitor from the Veracitron thing? She's not really self-made. She's got backing. You know how these stories get spun." She didn't stop walking. She didn't look back. But the words burned hotter than any endgame. Across the room, Dorian was locked in his own battles, playing tight, drawing 2, winning 1. But he wasn't there for the prize. He was there for proof that this wasn't a fluke, that her brilliance wasn't just lightning, it was legacy. After her final match of the day, Elena stepped into the lobby for air. Her hands were shaking, not from nerves, but from holding back. Dorian was already there, leaning against a column, sipping from a cup of burnt coffee. "You played like you already won," he said. "I played like I had something to lose," she replied. They stood in silence. Then she asked, "Why are you still here?" He hesitated. Then, "Because I think this might be the first time I've ever cared who wins. Besides me." She gave him a long look. "Let me guess," he added. "Tomorrow, you don't want handshakes or headlines." "Number? I want clarity." She turned to leave. But just before she stepped away, she asked, "You'll clap?" "Loud enough to embarrass myself," he said, smiling. The next morning came fast, too fast. The tension in the air was electric. Reporters whispered by the doors. Tournament officials adjusted placards. Photographers circled like sharks in polite clothing. Elena sat at board 4. Across from her, a man with steel-colored hair and a Wall Street jawline. His nameplate said Bradley Knox. His expression said, "You're in the wrong chair." He offered his hand. "Ready, Miss Morris?" She shook it. "I've been ready." The clock started. She played not to prove, not to perform. She played to breathe. 43 moves later, she exhaled. His king tipped. From the corner of her eye, she saw Dorian lose his own match. But when he looked at her, he was already clapping, louder than anyone else. The trophy didn't feel like victory. It felt like a prop. A glass monument perched between plates of imported cheese and men in tuxedos who said words like representation and inspiration, like they were business metrics. Elena stood near the far wall of the ballroom, untouched ginger ale in hand. The air smelled of lobster and press releases. Her name, engraved in crystal, sat on a table nearby, surrounded by strangers suddenly calling her Trailblazer. She didn't smile. Across the room, Dorian lingered by a group of foundation directors, nodding politely, but searching. When their eyes met, she didn't need to say anything. He crossed the room slowly. "You okay?" he asked. "I've never been in a room with this much seafood and this many fake smiles," he chuckled. "You won, Elena. You changed the board. she exhaled. Then why does it feel like I'm just a different kind of pawn? Before he could answer, the governor of Illinois appeared, hand outstretched and face preloaded with press camera warmth. Miss Morris, your story has moved the entire state. We'd love to partner with you. Maybe a statewide tour. Classroom talks. Let young minds see what's possible. Elena's eyes didn't blink. You mean, let me stand on a stage while people talk about how I got lucky? The governor paused. I wouldn't say lucky. You're exceptional. I always was, she said softly. You just didn't notice until it was convenient. He backed away with a nod and an awkward smile. Dorian raised an eyebrow. You didn't have to burn him like that. I didn't, she said. I just lit the truth and let it speak for itself. Then she looked up. Can we get out of here? Without another word, they slipped through the side exit, trophy left behind. The cold night air bit through her jacket, but it was welcome. They walked in silence, past glowing skyscrapers and storefronts that had never known her name. By the Riverwalk, she stopped. I used to come here after shifts, she said, eyes scanning the dark water. Just to feel like I still existed, that I was part of something. You are, Dorian said. No, she replied. Now they're watching. But that's not the same as listening. He leaned on the railing. Then make them listen. Do something they can't ignore. She turned toward him. What? A book? A TED Talk? Mops to Mastery? He shook his head. Number something quieter. Permanent. I want you to run the youth initiative. Full-time. Salary. Staff. Build it your way. She stared at him. From Veracitron? Number, from the nonprofit you inspired. You'll shape it. Not me. Her voice dropped. Is this another favor? Number, it's repayment. For every kid who saw you and decided not to disappear. She didn't answer immediately. Her hands rested on the railing, breath curling in the cold air. Then, all right, he smiled. Under one condition, she added. Name it. No press. No donors with cameras, just the work. Deal. They walked again, quiet laughter flickering between them like candlelight. As they neared the subway steps, she said, You know, I never played that last game for glory. I know. I played it so the next girl like me wouldn't be erased while someone else held the mic. He nodded. You didn't just win, Elena. You redefined what the board looks like. She gave him a look. Don't get poetic. He grinned. Too late. Later that night, she returned home. No trophy, no headlines. Just her quiet apartment. On the table, she placed two pieces. A black queen, and beside it, the smallest pawn. One that had crossed the board and never turned back. Outside, the city moved on. But Elena had already made her next move. And this time, the world would follow.